We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation tonight. I will be giving you an insight into how I'll be voting on tomorrow's Brexit debate. That's coming shortly. The Metropolitan Police has been castigated by the Casey Review. Is it institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic? We'll be having the debate. And is it another case of ULEZ, you lose? We'll be joined by the author of a new report which suggests Mr. Khan's claims about pollution deaths are suspect at best. State of the Nation starts now. We'll also be hearing from our acclaimed panel, Emma Webb of the Common Sense Society and the journalist Jonathan Steele. But as ever, I want to hear from you. Please get in touch by emailing mailmog@gbnews. Before all of that, it's been a busy day, and here to keep us up to date is Polly Middlehurst.
Jacob, thanks very much indeed. Well, our top story on GB News tonight, as you were hearing Jacob say, a damning report into Britain's largest police force has been described by the Home Secretary as very concerning. Baroness Louise Casey, who led the review, found the Met Police to be institutionally racist, misogynist and homophobic. The report also found the Met's current ethics standards and disciplinary procedures have failed abysmally and is calling for a complete overhaul of the service. And Suella Braverman said she had every faith that the Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, would be a catalyst now for change, and she's vowed to hold officers and the Mayor of London to account. Boris Johnson has accepted he misled Parliament over Partygate, but maintains it wasn't intentional or reckless. Submitting his 52-page defence dossier to the Privileges Committee, the former Prime Minister admitted gatherings at Downing Street during lockdown should never have taken place. He also said statements in the House of Commons were made in good faith. He's due to give more evidence in person before MPs tomorrow. Counter-terrorism police are investigating an attack outside a mosque in Birmingham and a warning to television viewers. We're about to show video of the moment a man was set alight, which some may find distressing. Let's look then at this CCTV footage, which shows the victim walking home, being approached yesterday and then being sprayed with an unknown substance. West Midlands Police says he suffered serious injuries, including burns to his face, but they're not thought to be life-threatening. A man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. And Russia has strengthened ties with China by saying it's prepared to step up its oil deliveries to the country. President Putin made the comments on the second day of the Chinese leader's state visit to Moscow, describing talks with President Xi as constructive, adding he hoped they would remain in contact. Yesterday, Putin welcomed his dear friend to the Kremlin, and the pair discussed China's peace plan for Ukraine. Lastly, a group of Eurosceptic Conservative MPs have described parts of the Prime Minister's new Brexit deal with the EU as practically useless. The European Research Group commissioned lawyers to scrutinise the Windsor framework ahead of tomorrow's vote on the Stormont break element of the proposal. A spokesperson for Rishi Sunak, however, said it is a good deal and urged lawmakers to back it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ Radio Plus on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time now for Jacob Rees-Mogg.
I'm a loyal Conservative. I want to support the government. I was elected on a Conservative ticket, on a Conservative manifesto. And although that election was led by a different Prime Minister, nonetheless, I want the Conservative Party to do well and to be united. And I'm encouraged that the opinion polls have picked up. This is good news for Conservatism, it's good news for the country, because Conservative governments actually run the country better. But tomorrow, we've got a vote on the Windsor framework. Now, what is the Windsor framework? It is the extension of, the supposed reform of, the adaptation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the aim of it is to ensure that Northern Ireland is firmly anchored in the United Kingdom rather than is separated from Great Britain, and that the trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland should be eased so that goods can flow and that supermarket shelves can be filled. That's what the Windsor framework is about, and it's about a democratic break to ensure that Stormont has some say over the rules that take place in Northern Ireland. Now, the DUP view of this is obviously very important. The DUP is the biggest unionist voice in Northern Ireland, and it looked for a time as if they were going to sit on their hands, that they were going to abstain and not oppose the deal, even though they weren't fully satisfied with it. And had they done that, I think many others, including me, would have done the same. You can't be more Catholic than the Pope, not necessarily the best reference in referring to the DUP, but you can't be more unionist than the most unionist. But they have decided that they will not support the deal, and that means everybody has to look through it in detail. And that's what's been done by the committee set up by Marc Francois, the chairman of the European Research Group, which went to really strong legal advisors to see what was actually happening. And what they came up with was not the same as the view given by His Majesty's government. Indeed, it was closer to the view that was in fact given by the European Commission. So, the government claimed that 1,700 pages of EU laws are disapplied. The report found no EU laws will be disapplied or removed from Northern Ireland. We were told that the jurisdiction of the European Court would be disapplied. The report found Northern Ireland will remain subject to the European Commission and the European Court of Justice. As was said to me by a very senior member of the DUP, European Union law remains a major part of Northern Ireland's settlement and in certain areas outranks UK law. So we were told that the deal would restore Northern Ireland's place in the Union and safeguard sovereignty, because this is what it's about. We voted to leave as one United Kingdom, not as Great Britain and then separately Northern Ireland, and we are one people under the Act of Union of 1800. We were told that there would be green lanes, and you know what a green lane is. When you come back from your holidays, you go through a green lane and nobody stops you. But the green lane to Northern Ireland requires 21 pieces of information to be given. So what was it, that line in Macbeth that may apply to the Windsor framework? The multitudinous Irish Sea and Carnadine, the green one is made red. And last of all, the Stormont break, which is what we're actually voting on tomorrow, is said to be hard to use. But even there, we've been told that though the vote technically is on the break, we're actually voting on the whole of the protocol. So even if the break is good, we're being asked to vote on the bits that are not good. And the guardian angels of unionism, the DUP, have said that it's not good enough. So that's the position we're in. We are facing a vote tomorrow. I will not find it possible to support His Majesty's government in this vote. Whether I vote against, I will tell you tomorrow when I've voted, so tune in then. But I always want to know what you think. What would you do if you were at home? Get in touch. Email me at mailmog@gbnews.uk. But now I'm joined by the doyenne of Brexiteers, Ann Widdecombe, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, though now a renegade, I fear. Miss Widdecombe, you've left us.
I have left you for the second time. I joined the Brexit Party, as you'll be aware, in 2019. Actually, I haven't left you for the second time because I never did rejoin the Conservatives. I did refuse to join Reform because I don't believe in proportional representation, but I do believe even more strongly in saving the Union. And I think the Union is now imperiled by this Windsor framework. I'm glad to hear you're not supporting it. Shame on you if you abstain, is all I can say, William. You should jolly well vote against, because I want to see the Union saved. I don't think it will be with this.
But don't you think you should give the Prime Minister some credit for getting a deal that, to be fair, neither of his predecessors had managed to get, nor indeed had Theresa May. So 3 previous Prime Ministers hadn't done this. He's got an agreement with the EU. It does ease some parts of the protocol, and it does provide a break to Stormont. That's surely a democratic benefit.
No, and I mean, you've heard the lawyer's view that all those claims that you've just made on the Prime Minister's behalf, because they were claims that he made, are in fact not borne out by the, not even the small print, just by clause analysis. So, and what's happened is very straightforward. Theresa May tried to get the most awful deal. Boris tinkered with that deal. Rishi has now tinkered with Boris's deal. But we still are in a situation, after all that tinkering, in which EU law prevails in Northern Ireland. Now, the Conservative manifesto said, in terms it said, we will leave the EU as one UK. Well, you know, Northern Ireland is part of the UK, and it's still in the single market, and it's still subject to the ECJ, and European law is still supreme in too many areas there. So, no, I don't give the Prime Minister credit for this. I think he's gone down the path of his predecessors. He's gone in fighting, found it very, very difficult because of the intransigence of the EU, and has come up with a fudge and is now presenting that fudge as a glorious triumph. Well, it isn't.
But on the break, doesn't that actually begin the process of divergence? Because if Stormont uses the break, then it will be able to refuse new EU laws, particularly if they clash with GB laws. It will be able to say that they have a disproportionate effect, will have an effect on the trade GB to Northern Ireland, and that as it begins to diverge, it will become less and less under the control of the European Union, and that is a positive. We may not have got everything, but you and I are both Catholics. We know we don't live in a perfect world, and in this imperfect world, this is better than nothing.
No, it's not better than nothing. There was some loosening of the handcuffs as far as the bureaucracy of trade goes, and that I welcome. But the handcuffs are still on. Now you've peddled the Prime Minister's line that under the Stormont break, Northern Ireland can refuse any new law made by the EU that it doesn't like. But now read the text. If that happens, the EU can demand compensation because they can say by refusing that law, what you have done is give yourself a competitive advantage away from the level playing field. And we won't have that, so we will have compensation, please. And of course, even if it was a small amount of compensation, if you multiply it by the way that it will be applied, it comes to a large sum. So Stormont break is an EU cash cow if it's ever used, because it's so hedged about with ifs and ands and buts. They're very hard to use anyway. And then if it is used, the EU demand compensation. I mean, God bless us, that isn't freedom from the EU. And we wouldn't tolerate that in the rest of the UK. Why are we expecting Northern Ireland to?
Well, thank you, Anne. Whether you are a Conservative or belong to another party, you are as forceful and well-informed as ever. Thank you very much. Don't forget to let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.uk. After the break, the Metropolitan Police is in a crisis. There's lots to talk about there. I'm sure you won't want to go anywhere.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Evening all. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch with your thoughts. Michael, very interesting thought from Michael. Jacob, ever fancied presenting Match of the Day? You would be a revelation. Well, no doubt I would be over the moon and all sorts of other sporting cliches of that kind, but I think I'd rather do Test Match Special if anyone's offering. Alan says the framework is another strike against the Union, Brexit and democracy. Disgraceful. Hopefully it's voted down. And Jeff says this is the best deal we're going to get. Well, I began with Evening All, which, as you will remember, was how Dixon of Dock Green used to start when that was broadcast, an image of policing that is perhaps familiar to us all. Is it too sentimental? A damning 363-page report into culture and standards of the Metropolitan Police has laid bare its deep and widespread failings. Baroness Casey spent a year examining the Yard's culture and practices and concluded that it's failing women and children, discrimination is rife, and public confidence has been shattered. The report found that fridges and freezers containing samples of evidence from victims and survivors were overflowing and could barely shut. It also found that during the summer heatwave in 2022, one of the freezers containing evidence had broken down, leaving all alleged cases of rape dropped, owing to lack of evidence. Britain's top police officer refused to resign and vowed to turn Scotland Yard around after Baroness Casey said its ranks are riven with racism, misogyny and homophobia. I'm delighted to be joined now by my panel, Emma Webb of the Common Sense Society and the journalist Jonathan Steele. Thank you so much for joining me. Before I left the House of Commons this evening, I spoke to a couple of police officers there. And meeting them day in, day out, these are really good people. I used to say good morning to Keith Palmer, who was murdered on duty outside the House of Commons. Jonathan, how can the police have come to this? How can this report have come about?
Well, I think there's just been this chronic racism and misogyny in the force. I don't like to use the word institutional. I think Mark Rowley is correct to say it's the wrong word. I don't think it means anything. Let's say there's endemic racism or embedded racism, but institutional means nothing. But the fact is there are too many white male police officers, not enough black, brown people, not enough women, and it's created this culture, the locker room culture, if you like, where people banter with male jokes and almost in front of the few women police officers there are to provoke them. It's a disgrace. And you've mentioned in your introduction the thing about rape allegations and rape investigations, which was almost like Keystone Cops not being able to shut the fridge door because there was so much evidence just rammed in there.
And Emma, is this a question of leadership? Or is it that does it all come back to leadership? They're not employing the right people, they're not managing people correctly? Because, as I say, the individual constables that one meets always seem very sensible, friendly and helpful.
And whenever I have had professional interactions with the police through my work, you know, they are salt of the earth people who care about law and order. And I agree, I think Mark Rowley was right to take a step back from the word institutional, because what do we mean when we say that something is institutionally racist or misogynistic? It's a word that is deeply ideologically loaded, and it implies that if something is institutionally rotten, it implies that you can take all of the people out of it and it would still continue to be racist, misogynistic and so on. And I don't think that that is a correct understanding of the situation. I think you would be right to say that the Metropolitan Police is clearly riddled with failure and that public trust is at an all-time low with good reason, and the issue of vetting, I think, is extremely important. And the Met at the moment are going through re-vetting all of their officers, and I think that they are taking this issue very seriously. But it's quite clear, and you mentioned that the fridges and the samples taken from rape kits, which are, you know, the primary evidence in any rape trial that puts in jeopardy all of those women for whom those rape kits are the primary evidence. Obviously, this is not to dismiss the extraordinary failings of the police, and I think there are lots of reasons, aside from those in the Casey report, as to why the public's trust in the police is lower. We talked previously about NCHIs and cracking down on people's tweets rather than burglaries and things like that. But I think that to use the phrase institutional is incorrect, and we should steer clear of it.
So, Jonathan, is it a matter of competence? They're simply incompetent, and that's what led to the issues with the fridges and the loss of evidence?
Well, there must be an element of incompetence about it. Otherwise, it's hard to explain what it is. It's not ill will by the police themselves. It's just that they're not up to the job a lot of the time.
And how do you change this? What is it? Why do we look back at the police that we used to have and think that they were competent and honest and effective? What has gone wrong? Emma, were you saying that it's wokeness that has made it go wrong?
I think there are lots of reasons. I think that you mentioned leadership, and I think that when people look back with nostalgia on the police force of the past, you think of the Bobby on the beat, you think of that personal relationship that people had with their local police officers, and that's no longer what we have. I think that the Metropolitan Police has become far, and not just the Metropolitan Police, but the police force in this country, as many institutions, have become far too top-down. And have lost that relationship with the people that they serve. I think that there are all sorts of problems. And when we talk about the particular issue with the fridges, you know, those fridges should have been replaced. This is also about the allocation of funding and money, and this is a case throughout all of our institutions and throughout, you know, various quangos and so on. Public money should be, you know, every penny should be used effectively, and I think that money is being spent on the wrong things and not going to the right things.
And that was one of the things that came out of the report, that there are certain areas of the police that are almost unlimitedly funded, and then they have a freezer that breaks down. So the armed police seem to be able to get whatever resources they need.
Well, there seems to be a massive shortage of cash over the last 12 years of austerity. The police budgets have been cut.
But that's not what the report said. The report said that the Diplomatic Protection Squad had all the money it needed for overtime.
Well,
and
they do, but other departments don't.
That's right. So it wasn't the police as a whole that was short of money. It was the way it was divided up, and that's a management decision, not a government
but
austerity
more than 100
decision.
Police stations have closed, apparently. 126, I think, was the figure given. This is the backroom staff. I was just talking to a policeman on the way here, who actually was the taxi driver's son was a copper. He said, and the copper, his son of the driver, said the backroom staff have all been sacked or retired because there's no money for them. So the people on the beat not only have to do what they're doing publicly, visibly, they also then have to go back into the office, write it all up, type it all up, which used to be done by secretarial clerical staff.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Blexley, who is a former Metropolitan Police detective. Peter, thank you for coming on. Was it like this in your day?
Well, I was a uniformed constable in the late 70s and the early 1980s, and the police were far from perfect then. But the level and the scale of offending that we're seeing by current serving police officers, not only in the Met but further afield, is utterly unprecedented. This report, sadly, comes as no surprise to many of us today, but it is an iceberg, and the Metropolitan Police has crashed into it today. The organisation is holed beneath the water, and it will simply be a case now of whether they can get enough decent, honest hands on deck to rectify the ship and stop it from sinking.
So tell me, do you think this is a Metropolitan Police problem exclusively, or does it apply to forces across the United Kingdom?
Well, there is a natural kind of bleed, I think, into other forces, and if you're a keen observer of policing like I am, you will have noticed that officers from other police forces have been arrested, have been convicted, and some are currently under investigation for very serious crimes, many of a sexual nature. So it's not exclusively the Met's problem, but of course the unforgivable and odious crimes of Wayne Couzens and David Carrick brought a very bright spotlight onto the Met. It's the biggest police service in the country. It gets the most money. It attracts the most publicity. And quite frankly, this report has shown it today to be in an appalling situation. Something radical has to be done. And whilst senior politicians are entrusting Sir Mark Rowley to get it right, this cannot be done simply from top-down diktat. There has to be a bottom-up willingness to confront all this odious wrongdoing, because the vast majority of police officers are constables and sergeants, and it is them that will be witnessing, hearing about the wrongdoing and the frankly unacceptable. And now they must be encouraged to come forward and report. Whistleblowers must be seen as truth-tellers and a help to the organisation, and not as people that rock the boat and should be moved sideways.
And how would you make that happen? Say you were to become Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police tomorrow. How would you make the constables, allow the constables and the sergeants to bring you that information so that you could reform it?
In the utterly unlikely event that that were ever to happen, I would spend days and weeks visiting the frontline staff, not by some kind of stage-managed photo shoot, but under the radar, so to speak, and unannounced. And I would spend as much time as I possibly could visiting every police station, every command unit, pretty much like Baroness Casey did, and encouraging officers to do something which is very, very simple. With their every thought, with their every word, and with their every deed, do the right thing.
And you think that would get through, or do you think the Metropolitan Police is actually just too big and that it needs to be divided up into smaller units?
It is a vast organisation, and Baroness Casey today heavily hinted that if it doesn't get its house in order in very short time, then it may have to be broken up into perhaps, say, 4 different police services covering London. But strategically, that would be incredibly problematic, because you would have cross borders within the same city, for example. And when you break it down into smaller constabularies, it's a fact that some chief constables around the country treat their police services as little fiefdoms. And whilst they do get orders from on high from the College of Policing, they simply revel sometimes in doing things differently from their neighbours. And if that were to happen in the vast metropolis in London, in our capital city, then sadly that would damage police effectiveness across a lot of things: sporting events, major public order, demonstrations, counter-terrorism and the like. So I sincerely hope the Met does get itself in order and the breakup does not occur.
But you have the City Police, you've got that division, and there used to be the Royal Parks Police, and you've got the Transport Police. So you have got different forces within the metropolis anyway. Isn't small perhaps more beautiful?
I don't think so with regards to London, simply because of the amount of crime it has to deal with and the complexity of the crime, and the fact that villains will travel from east to west London every day of the week committing criminality or conspiring to commit criminality. I think it will be clunky, it will be cumbersome, and it really will not help with the bigger picture of fighting crime. And on that note, I chime entirely with Baroness Casey when she says that the frontline officers, the officers that the public are going to come into contact with every day in their darkest hours, has been sadly neglected, and a spotlight and reform has to happen with regards to the vital front line.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see if you do become Commissioner tomorrow, and thank you also to my panel for their wisdom this evening. Still ahead, we'll be joined by the barrister Martin Howe, who specialises in EU law. What could be more exciting? We are back in a few of Kipling's unforgiving minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. You'll never guess. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. And I'm absolutely delighted to have with me Martin Howe, KC, a very distinguished EU lawyer who is perhaps the greatest expert in his field. So we can now look at the law with Martin as it relates to the Windsor framework. You've been involved in producing the ERG paper, and you've come up with some really startling points. So I was saying at the beginning, the government has said 97% of the laws have gone. You say no laws have gone. Can you explain how that can be right?
Well, I can explain how what I say is right. I can't explain why it was ever said that 97% of laws have been removed from Northern Ireland, because looking at the legal texts, which are extremely complex, that is just not the case. Not a single European Union law that applies to Northern Ireland under the protocol is to be removed from Northern Ireland under the Windsor framework.
So what do they mean when they say 97% laws? There must be something underpinning that. Government doesn't just make things up.
I honestly absolutely no idea where that 97% comes from. We do have an idea about why they're saying that some laws are being disapplied. They're not being disapplied from Northern Ireland. There's a limited number of EU laws which are disapplied from a special, if you like, channel for goods coming from Great Britain. And by no means all of them, but a chunk of them.
And is this the Green Lane?
That is the so-called Green Lane.
And the Green Lane will mean that there's free trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Well,
so that's a great success for the Prime Minister.
It would be if it were anything like a Green Lane of the kind you go through at an airport when you arrive, where you just sort of walk through with your suitcases and walk out the other end if you've got nothing to declare, and you don't have to fill in any forms or anything. No, this Green Lane is actually highly restricted. You have to register for it. You have this particular one, you have to have a registered establishment on a special list in Great Britain, which might be, say, a supermarket distribution warehouse, and then registered establishments at the other end which sell the goods to retail. So it's only, I mean, it's probably useful for supermarkets, for example, but it's not of general use for traders.
So if I set up a business to deliver Bartholomew biscuits, which are now quite difficult to get, unfortunately, from GB to Northern Ireland, and I had a friend who ran a corner shop, could I take over to him 100 packets of Bartholomew biscuits without making any declaration in a Green Lane?
No, you could not. You would have to register, he would have to register, you would have to put in an online declaration before you took the consignment under the scheme. You'd have to be a trusted trader, and if you were suspected of heaven forfend, sending these Bath Oliver biscuits across the border into the Republic, you could have your trusted trader authorisation taken away.
And if I take them from London to Birmingham, that's fine. I don't need to do anything. I just have to be happy that the person will pay me on delivery.
Indeed. There are no formalities.
OK, so the green lane is not as green as we had hoped it would be. The laws haven't been removed. What about the emergency brake? Isn't that a good thing? Won't that lead to divergence, as I was asking Ms Widdecombe, so that EU law, not immediately, but over the course of years, ceases to apply in Northern Ireland because they increasingly use the brake?
I think that's very unlikely. I mean, the big thing to appreciate about this brake is that it doesn't allow Northern Ireland to do the same thing we can do in this country. Indeed, under the bill that you promoted, the retained EU law bill, which will allow European Union laws that we've carried over from our membership to be revised and reformed. And the problem is that process will go ahead. Northern Ireland will not be able to do it. People there can't vote to change these laws. And that will create divergence.
And if we diverge in GB, the laws that allow for the green lane, green as it is, are EU law, aren't they? They're not international treaty law. What difference does that make?
Well, that does make a very big difference. And in my view, it was a very, very poor negotiating decision, because what the EU, in effect, has offered to do is to create these special dispensations under EU law by passing regulations. The EU legislator will pass regulations which will apply directly, just like Acts of Parliament, no intervening process, but only in UK territory in Northern Ireland.
And who enforces these laws?
Those laws are completely under the control of the European Court of Justice and the Commission.
So we haven't got rid of the European Court of Justice, we haven't really got a green lane, and we haven't got the freedom for Northern Ireland that we were hoping for.
Well, I think it's particularly important to look at it from the point of view of Northern Ireland and businesses in Northern Ireland. Let's take this sort of green lane facility, where if you go through the green lane facility, certain EU laws don't apply to the goods you send from Great Britain. Now, that exception from EU law is expressly restricted to goods that come from Great Britain. Goods made in Northern Ireland are not allowed to take advantage of it. So that means Northern Ireland businesses won't be able to compete on an even basis.
Still under EU law.
Yeah, they will.
Martin, thank you so much, and thank you for the amazing amount of work that you have done on this. Coming up next, ULEZ or you lose. Have Mr. Khan's supporting claims been slightly exaggerated? Surely not. Find out after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Jacob Rees-Mogg. You've been getting in touch with your mail mogs. Zach asks, can you advise the change in principles that allowed you to vote for the third reading of the withdrawal agreement but can't vote for the Windsor framework? I can indeed. I thought for the third meaningful vote, we might lose Brexit altogether. Rod says there has been fudge after fudge. Fudge always gets it in the neck. I quite like fudge, but never mind. With Brexit, and Northern Ireland is the same. We voted to leave, we didn't vote for deals that undermine Northern Ireland, our fishing waters and our borders. And Bob says, I may not agree, but I still can't get my head round why there cannot be a UK-EU border between the Republic and Northern Ireland. Actually, Bob, I do agree. We could leave it without a physical border, and if the EU wanted one, that would be a matter for them. Let's turn to the ULEZ, because recently the controversial expansion has led to the Mayor Sadiq Khan claiming that 4,000 people die prematurely every year because of pollution. These are very bold claims. The research Mr. Khan refers to was conducted by the ERG. Now, that's not the good and holy ERG, of which I used to be chairman, the wonderful European Research Group, but some outfit called the Environmental Research Group of Imperial College London. But new research has suggested these figures aren't all they are cracked up to be. And these are the sort of claims which we should be absolutely certain about before implementing such an anti-motorist measure. But I'm delighted to be joined now by the author of this research, Ben Pyle, and the anti-ULEZ activist, Alan Miller, of the Together Association. So the Mayor has issued a statement, which I'm going to come to later, saying you're trying to mislead the public by calling into question the scientific evidence. What do you say to that?
Well, that's an interesting reply. In fact, the ERG's research was based on a report in 2018 by the Committee on the Medical Effects of Air Pollution, and that found that there may be a relationship between increased mortality risk and air pollution, or the other way around. But it was very careful to say that you shouldn't express that relationship in terms of deaths. Deaths mean something very particular to most people. It is obviously someone dying. But actually, they're talking about something that later has been called the statistical construct. So that this means that if you tot up all of the amount that they estimate our lives to be shortened by air pollution, then you can sort of somehow call that so many deaths. Actually what happens is very early on in the report, if you read it in the first few pages of the discussion, it turns out there's very much a debate about this technique, this statistical technique. And so they caution that using the word deaths will mislead the public. In
the report itself, the ERG report says using the term deaths will mislead the public.
Exactly. And the
Mayor's now accusing you of misleading.
That's right. That's right. And so they're saying you mustn't use the word. Well, you shouldn't use the word deaths because it's misleading. And there's the discussion about how to correctly frame these terms.
Alan, you're protesting against the ULEZ extension. What's your main objection? Isn't it a good thing to reduce traffic?
No, I don't think it is ostensibly, but there's a number of things. Firstly, it's undemocratic in the sense that the so-called consultation rejected over 5,000 respondents on the basis that they had a relationship, they supported fair fuel. It also then rejected over 60% of people that said they didn't want it. He also the mayor bought ANPR cameras before the actual consultation. And now he's smearing people and calling them names, everything from deniers to conspiracists, but not engaging in the debate when people are saying they don't want it. This is boroughs, councils, residents, businesses, ordinary people. And actually, there's no causation whatsoever in this. This is why Together's very proud to be supporting Ben Pyle in this, because there's no causation whatsoever. He knows, TfL and others, they know. I would go as far to say this to Sadiq Khan. You're actually lying. So you want to call people names, it's very shabby, but you know unequivocally this is not the case. And it's the last position he's got on this. And we're saying that ULEZ needs to go. The majority of people don't want it. It's a stealth tax on people and it's a war on cars in a cost of living crisis. It's unacceptable.
Hasn't he got a democratic mandate? He won the vote. The Tory candidate lost.
He did win the vote. He did win the vote, but he didn't win the vote on the basis of implementing an expansion of ULEZ. And so that's very clear. And if he wants to take a referendum on it, then perhaps we should do that. But that's essentially what he said he didn't want when he had the consultation. He said this is not a referendum. So it seems like the mayor's not happy to engage democratically, and it needs to go.
And Ben, is there any number you would put on the number of deaths that come from car pollution in London?
I think the mortality probably isn't the way to address it. Since the middle of the last century, since the 1950s or 60s, life expectancy in the UK has been increasing by 72 days per person per year. And so we're talking, if there is an effect of if there's a medical effect, a clinical effect of air pollution, it's in the order of 1 year of that benefit. So we're moving 72 days forward every year, and maybe we're moving 2 weeks backwards every 10 years, if you saw what I mean.
I understand.
So it's a very difficult number to calculate against such a radical improvement as we've seen. And I think that's largely a result of increased wealth. And wealth is by far the strongest determinant of health outcomes. And what we point out in the report is that this is undermining people's ability to do trade and move around.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. Thank you both. That was Ben Pyle there, the author of the research, and Alan Miller, the anti-ULEZ activist of the Together Association. Now, it is crucially important, as always, to hear both sides to this debate. Pollution is a real problem in various cities across the United Kingdom, and we need to address these matters. But I can't help thinking that we've already made plenty of environmental progress without resorting to oppressive, low-traffic policies. Our team actually checked the Office for National Statistics figure on deaths caused by pollution between the years of 2001 and 2021. 1 death has been caused by car emissions in London. So there's a vast disparity here between what Mr. Khan claims and what is suggested by the ONS. But joining me now is the director of the climate charity, Possible, Leo Murray. Leo, thank you so much for coming in, sparing your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.
You think that ULEZ is the right way to deal with pollution?
Well, I think, look, let's just start with the report. Your previous guest was presenting his report. I have had the opportunity to read that report, unlike most of the most people watching. It did not take long. It's a single A4 side, Jacob. This is a guy who has no credentials that is attacking one of the world's foremost research institutions on the health impacts of exposure to air pollution. Imperial College is one of the most important universities in the world, with world-leading academics.
That's a very, very prestigious university.
Yes.
But the point he quoted was that the ERG itself says that looking at excess deaths is not the right way to do it. Is that correct? Is that in the ERG report?
So I sent his report to the team at Imperial, who are being critiqued in it, to ask them for their thoughts. And they said, look, there is a very large and growing body of evidence. It's not just about deaths. There is a very large and growing body of evidence that exposure to traffic pollution is directly causing a whole range of very severe public health impacts. So that ranges from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, teenage psychosis is now implicated, and asthma, right? Now, my daughter was diagnosed with asthma on a high pollution day last year. It was very scary. We had to call paramedics out to our home. She couldn't breathe properly. We live near the A4 in West London. Now, there is, what you can see in the data, anybody can go and check this, is that every time there is a high pollution event and the mayor issues a warning, there is a spike in hospital admissions of children for asthma.
Right? On the disadvantage.
This is what Ben is trying to debunk. He's saying that there's not a causal relationship here.
I don't disagree with you at all on the terrible effects of pollution. The question is ULEZ the right answer, or was it in fact a terrible policy mistake of telling people to buy diesel cars promoted by a Labour government in the EU that increased particulate pollution in London? And now people who did what the government said are being penalised. And isn't that just unfair?
Well, it was largely the car lobby it was the motor making lobby that pushed the line that people ought to buy diesel vehicles because they're marginally more carbon efficient. That was a terrible mistake, and many people were suckered into that and bought diesel cars and are now finding that they're being penalised.
The then government and the EU pushed that very strongly to the benefit of the German car manufacturing industry.
No, I wouldn't argue with that, Jacob. That is absolutely the case.
But isn't it then very unfair to penalise the people who did what the government encouraged them to do? They thought they were doing the right thing.
Well, right now, there are actually very few people, only about 15% of the cars in outer London boroughs will have to pay this fee. Now, when you ask Londoners, they think that it's a much higher share than that. Many people are driving compliant cars now, but not realising it, thinking that they're going to be charged under this. It's only the most polluting vehicles that are going to have to pay this charge.
Thank you for coming in. I hope you'll come back. A spokesman for the Mayor of London said, the ULEZ is proven to work, and expanding it London-wide will lead to 5 million more Londoners being able to breathe cleaner air. Rather than engaging in legitimate discussion and debate about this air quality, it's disappointing to see some opponents trying to mislead the public by seeking to call into question the scientific evidence. Well, I'm very grateful for their response, and the Mayor would always be welcome as a guest. Anyway, that's all from me. Up next is Dan Wootton. Mr. Wootton, what have you got in your box of tricks tonight?
Oh my goodness, I would love to see Rees-Mogg versus Sadiq Khan. He won't be brave enough. He won't be brave enough, but I really hope it does. Lots on the way, by the way, including one of your colleagues, Andrea Jenkyns, of course, the former Education Minister, who has a very bold proposal. Jacob, she's been annoyed about the Gary Glitter situation. She says that rather than us giving him £15,000 on the NHS for a NEOP, he should actually be chemically castrated. So she's going to be here to explain how that would work later in the show.
Well, that sounds absolutely wonderful. Unfortunately, I didn't hear most of it, which means I'm going to have to watch to find out what the excitements are. That comes after the weather, which you won't want to miss. I'm back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this has been...
Hello, I'm Craig Snow, and here is your latest forecast from the Metropolitan.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till